It was a sunny Saturday morning when I realized that my peaceful life in the quiet suburban neighborhood was about to be shattered. I had spent years taking care of my small farm, cultivating the land with my trusty tractor, which had become more than just a piece of equipment. It was a symbol of my independence, my hard work, and my connection to the land. But as the saying goes, peace is always temporary. And in this case, it was about to be interrupted by none other than Karen from the HOA. Karen had always been a thorn in the side of the neighborhood. She had a peculiar sense of entitlement, believing that she was the self-appointed ruler of all matters related to the homeowners association. Her complaints were legendary. From the color of fences to the length of grass, Karen seemed to have an issue with everything. No one was safe from her scrutiny. But on this day, she had crossed a line that I never thought possible. It all started with a phone call. My tractor, which had been parked at the edge of my property, was apparently a violation of some obscure HOA rule about the visual aesthetic of the neighborhood. I didn't understand how a hard-working piece of equipment could be deemed offensive, but Karen had a different opinion. Her phone call was short, direct, and filled with the kind of passive aggression that only someone like her could muster. "You need to remove that tractor immediately," she told me, "or there will be consequences." Of course, I was taken aback. I had never received a warning about the tractor before, and I had been parking it there for years. It was well away from the road, tucked near the back of my property, and it wasn't as if it was an eyesore. But Karen's stubbornness knew no bounds. I politely told her that I had every right to park my tractor there, as long as it wasn't blocking any roads or causing any safety issues. That should have been the end of it, but I had underestimated Karen's obsession with power. Later that day, I noticed something unusual. A truck was parked in front of my property, and Karen was standing beside it, her arms folded, her face twisted into a look of determination. As I walked out to ask what was going on, she pointed to my tractor and declared, "This is the last straw. I've already called the sheriff. If you don't remove this tractor by the end of the day, I will have it seized." I was stunned. This was the extreme measure she had resorted to? Over a tractor? Before I could respond, Karen gave a short, sharp whistle, and two burly men climbed into the truck, ready to carry out her orders. They started to drive off toward my tractor, and it was then that I realized what was happening. They weren't just threatening to take it. They were going to physically seize it from me. My heart raced, and I rushed toward the tractor, hoping to prevent this madness from happening. But Karen was already making phone calls, and her voice rang out like a command. "Take it! Take it now!" she yelled. The men started to attach the tractor to the back of the truck, and before I knew it, my tractor was being lifted from its spot and hauled away like it was a stolen vehicle. I stood there, dumbfounded, unable to process what was happening. The idea that an HOA member, fueled by her own sense of superiority, could take away my property, my livelihood, was beyond comprehension. But this wasn't just an ordinary dispute. Karen had taken her power too far, and in that moment, I knew I had no choice but to fight back. The only thing I could do now was wait for the sheriff to show up and help me get my tractor back. Section 2. The return of the tractor the morning following the seizure was filled with tension. I had barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of how to get my tractor back. It wasn't just about the tractor itself. It was about standing up for what was right, about not letting someone like Karen have control over my property and my life. I knew I had to act quickly before things got even more out of hand. So, I did what any reasonable person would do in a situation like this. I called the sheriff. Sheriff Thompson was a man of few words, but he had a reputation for being fair and steadfast. When he arrived at my property, I could see the skepticism in his eyes as I explained the absurdity of the situation. "You're telling me she took your tractor?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, explaining how Karen had insisted it violated some HOA rule and had the men seize it without any prior warning. Sheriff Thompson listened carefully, jotting down a few notes before finally speaking. "I'll go over there and speak to her," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Let's see if we can't sort this out without any more drama." I watched as Sheriff Thompson drove off, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. I wasn't sure what kind of response he would get from Karen, but I had faith that the law was on my side. After all, it was my property, and no one, not even a self-appointed HOA enforcer, had the right to just take it away. It didn't take long for the sheriff to return, his patrol car rumbling down the road toward my house. Behind him, the truck carrying my tractor was slowly pulling into view. My heart leapt. It was coming back. As the truck rolled to a stop in front of my property, I could already hear Karen's furious voice rising above the noise of the engine. She was standing by the truck, arms flailing, her face bright red with anger. She was shouting at Sheriff Thompson, trying to argue her case, but he stood his ground, not a flicker of emotion on his face. "This is ridiculous," Karen screamed, her voice cracking with frustration. "That tractor is a blight on this neighborhood. It's an eyesore, and it violates every rule in the book." Sheriff Thompson didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, your actions were uncalled for. You can't just take someone's property without due process. That tractor is Mr. Your Name's property, and I'm returning it to him. If you have a legitimate issue with it, you can take it up with the HOA board, not seize it yourself." I stood there, watching the drama unfold, feeling a sense of satisfaction that the law was on my side. The moment Karen realized that the sheriff wasn't backing down, her face contorted with rage. She pointed at the tractor as it was carefully lowered back to the ground. "This isn't over," she shouted, shaking her fist in the air. "I'll make sure you regret this. You'll pay for this, I swear." But Sheriff Thompson wasn't having it. "Ma'am, I suggest you calm down and let the legal process handle it from here on out," he said, his voice unwavering. "If you continue to make threats, I'll have no choice but to take further action." Karen's outburst reached a peak as she screamed at the top of her lungs. "You can't do this. This is MY neighborhood," she yelled. The neighbors, who had been watching from their windows, started to gather outside, drawn to the spectacle unfolding before them. It was clear that Karen had crossed the line one too many times, and now the entire neighborhood was witnessing her unravel. At this point, Karen's emotional outburst had reached a boiling point. As the tractor was finally placed back where it belonged, she stormed off, her face flushed with fury. The sheriff gave me a quick nod before getting back into his patrol car, leaving me standing there with my property, which had been returned with little more than a few scratches from the ordeal. I looked at the tractor, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. It had been an exhausting battle, but in the end, justice had been served. Karen's grip on her self-imposed authority had been shattered, and I was finally able to take my tractor back where it belonged. But even as I stood there, I couldn't help but wonder what Karen would do next. I had no doubt that she would continue to make trouble, but for now, I had won. The neighbors, who had been watching from their windows, slowly began to disperse. Some nodded at me in approval, while others just shook their heads in disbelief at the scene they had witnessed. It was clear that Karen had lost the support of the community, and her reign of terror over the neighborhood might finally be coming to an end. As for me, I took a deep breath and climbed into my tractor, ready to continue my work. I had learned an important lesson. When it comes to standing up for what's right, sometimes the most unexpected allies come to your aid, whether it's the sheriff or the law itself. This section concludes the story with Karen's emotional outburst and the eventual resolution of the tractor's return. Let me know if you'd like any further adjustments or additions.